A pact in blood, bound ages deep, a vow of love that you must keep. The price was paid in memories shorn. To serve my light you are reborn. Your fidelity, a cold, bright flame. You wake to serve my love, my cold dark flame. I claim your breath, I claim your years. I drink your joys and drain your tears. My tribute found in every life, in every death, through peace and death and endless strife. The slate is clean, the bond is true. I wake you now, call you anew.
Otnem em irom.
Chapter 1, The Shattered Awakening. The world exploded into existence around him, not with a gentle dawn, but with the concussive force of a thunderous boom that ripped through the very fabric of his nascent consciousness. Otnem gasped, a raw, ragged sound that tore at his throat, as he found himself sprawled amidst the skeletal remains of what was once a sturdy building. Stone dust, acrid and biting, coated his tongue, mingling with the coppery tang of blood that seemed to permeate the very air. Splintered wood, jagged and cruel, lay scattered like forgotten bones, testament to a violence that had just begun, or perhaps was nearing its brutal end. Pain, a dull, insistent throb, hammered behind his eyes, a cruel reminder of a past he couldn't recall. He pushed himself up, every muscle protesting, his limbs feeling alien and heavy. The city around him was a symphony of chaos. The shrill clang of clashing steel, the desperate, guttural screams of civilians, and the relentless, earth-shaking rhythm of siege engines pounding against unseen walls. It was a maelstrom of destruction, and he was merely a forgotten piece of flotsam caught in its violent current. His eyes, unburdened by the encroaching night, pierced the gloom with an unnatural clarity. Dark vision, a gift or a curse, painted the devastated cityscape in stark, monochrome detail. Collapsed buildings leaned at impossible angles, their stone walls cracked like ancient pottery, still smoking from recent impacts. To his left, a market square, now a roaring inferno, cast grotesque, flickering shadows that danced with the dying. Wounded figures, both civilian and soldier, stumbled through the ruins, some seeking the illusory safety of crumbling walls, others locked in desperate, futile struggles. A partially destroyed watchtower, its upper levels miraculously intact, stood sentinel over the carnage. Closer, a guard, his uniform torn and bloodied, leaned against a fallen cart, his grip on a sword a white-knuckled testament to his fading strength. The siege was intense, chaotic, and far from over. An instinct, primal and insistent, stirred within him. He had to help. He had to bring order to this madness. He moved towards a cluster of huddled figures, his voice, though hoarse, carrying a surprising authority. "We must organize. We must fight back." But his words, sharp and clear to his own ears, seemed to dissolve into the cacophony. The wounded were too panicked, too disoriented. Their eyes, when they met his, were blank, shell-shocked pools reflecting only terror. An older woman, clutching a bleeding arm, mumbled incoherently, her gaze fixed on some unseen horror. A young soldier tried to rise, only to collapse back down with a groan. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle. The sheer, overwhelming chaos of the siege swallowed his efforts whole. People were too consumed by their own immediate survival to form a coordinated response. The distant sounds of fighting grew closer, a predatory growl, and a chilling realization dawned. Simply gathering these desperate souls might only draw unwanted attention, making them targets. He turned his attention to the soldiers, a grizzled sergeant with a bandaged arm meeting his gaze with suspicion. "And who are you to give orders?" the sergeant rasped, his voice raw from shouting, his eyes narrowed. Some soldiers glanced his way, but most remained fixed on their immediate, desperate defensive positions. The civilians were equally unresponsive. An elderly man shook his head, muttering about another madman in the chaos. A few younger survivors huddled together, too terrified to move, too numb to listen. The siege raged around him, the sounds of conflict growing closer, more insistent. His attempts to organize, to lead, had been met with skepticism and fear, a bitter taste in his mouth. Then, a thunderous crash, louder than any before, reverberated through his very bones. A section of the city's outer walls, a bastion of stone and mortar, crumbled inward, spewing dust and debris. Through the gaping breach, dark, hulking silhouettes began to pour in. The attackers were breaking through. The remaining soldiers tensed, their weapons raised, but their earlier demoralization was palpable, a heavy shroud of despair. The battle, already a maelstrom, intensified, spiraling further into the abyss. Otnam moved, a shadow among shadows, his cunning guiding him through the pandemonium. Fallen debris, thick smoke, and the sheer chaos of combat provided perfect cover. His dark vision, a silent sentinel, cut through the gloom, picking out a towering figure in dark armor. The enemy commander. The warlord moved with brutal efficiency, directing his troops with sharp, decisive gestures. As he drew closer, a glint of unnatural light caught his eye. The commander wore an ornate medallion, pulsing with a malevolent, dark energy. The warlord, oblivious to Otnam's presence, was a mere stone's throw away. One wrong move, one misplaced step, and his position would be compromised. He materialized an illusory duplicate, a perfect replica of himself, shimmering with arcane energy, directly before the commander. The warlord, startled, whirled around, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his weapon. The medallion at his neck pulsed, a malevolent red light mirroring the intensity of Otnam's magical projection. "Who dares?" the warlord snarled, his voice a guttural mix of anger and, surprisingly, a flicker of curiosity. The battle raged around them, a symphony of death and destruction. But for a fleeting moment, time seemed to slow, suspended in the tense standoff. His illusory self stood motionless, a silent challenge, awaiting the warlord's reaction. "I dare?" Otnam's voice, amplified by magic, echoed through the chaos. "Otnam is my name. What is yours?" Even as he spoke, an unseen servant, a shimmering, ethereal form, materialized silently behind the warlord, its invisible fingers poised. The commander's eyes narrowed, studying the illusion. "Bold words from a phantom," he growled, his gaze sweeping over the shimmering form. "I am Krell, warlord of the Blood Tide, and you are no ordinary intruder." The medallion pulsed again, casting an eerie red glow that painted Krell's face in demonic hues. Unbeknownst to Krell, the unseen servant, a silent predator, began its delicate work. "Krell, I demand you withdraw the blood tide or face my rage. Enough blood has been spilt on Earth this day." Otnam's illusory form stood tall, his voice resonating with otherworldly authority, a calculated distraction. Simultaneously, the unseen servant moved with ghostly precision, its invisible fingers delicately unhooking the medallion, lifting it from Krell's neck without a sound. The warlord, transfixed by the illusion, remained utterly unaware of the theft. Krell's expression shifted from anger to a momentary confusion. The pulsing red light of the medallion, now safely in the unseen servant's grasp, suddenly winked out, leaving him feeling inexplicably diminished. "Who are you?" Krell demanded, a hint of uncertainty now mixing with his previous bravado. Otnam's voice erupted with supernatural power, echoing with such intensity that nearby soldiers momentarily paused their fighting. "I said withdraw your forces or face your death, Krell." His words, loud and commanding, shattered Krell's composure. The illusion of power, once absolute, was now completely broken. Simultaneously, the unseen servant glided silently through the chaos, delivering the medallion to his hidden location. Its dark metal felt cold to the touch, etched with strange, pulsing runes that seemed to whisper of ancient, forbidden magic. Krell took an involuntary step back, his face pale. What are you?" he stammered, all previous bravado gone. The battle raged on, a brutal backdrop to this personal confrontation. But for this moment, everything hinged on Otnam's next words. "Withdraw your forces or your head will be at my feet. I offer you this courtesy only once." Otnum's illusory form materialized the medallion, holding it aloft like a grim trophy. Next time, this will be your head. Krell's face went ashen. The stolen medallion, a clear symbol of his power, now gleaming in the illusory hand, was a stark reminder of his vulnerability. Soldiers around him, sensing their commander's sudden hesitation, began to notice. For a moment, the battle seemed to pause. A collective breath held. Krell's hand trembled slightly, caught between a rising tide of rage and a chilling wave of fear. The fate of the city, and perhaps his own, hung in this single, suspended breath. Otnum let out a low, chilling laugh, a sound that seemed to scrape against the burning air. You're running out of time, Krell, to make your choice. Withdraw your forces, surrender or die. Tick-tock, tick-tock. He rolled the medallion in his illusory hand, a silent threat. But his attempt at maniacal intimidation, though potent, fell slightly flat. While his illusory form continued to hold the medallion, the laugh came across as more forced than truly terrifying. Krell's momentary fear began to transform back into a simmering anger, a dangerous glint returning to his eyes. Enough games! Krell roared, drawing his sword with a savage snarl. The soldiers around him tensed, ready to charge. Otnum's psychological warfare had pushed Krell to a breaking point, but not in the way he had intended. The battle's momentum shifted, a dangerous turn. His illusion had provoked rather than pacified the enemy commander. The city's fate now hung in a precarious balance, poised on the edge of a blade. Enough games? The end it is then, Otnum replied, his voice losing its theatrical edge, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I challenge you to a duel for the fate of the city. 1-on-1. The battlefield, miraculously, fell silent. Soldiers from both sides, their faces grim, began to shift and move, creating a makeshift arena of spears, swords, and shields amidst the burning city. A circle of death and anticipation. Krell, his eyes blazing with a renewed, desperate fury, accepted the challenge with a curt nod. This was it, the true test. The burning city crackled with tension, the air thick with smoke and the scent of impending death. Otnum, his mind racing, attempted to summon the nightmarish spell, Fear, a potent invocation designed to tear at the very soul of his opponent. But as he reached for the arcane energies, a chilling realization washed over him. His magical reserves were depleted since his awakening. His connection to evening glory, usually a wellspring of power, momentarily wavered, and the arcane energy, like smoke, slipped through his fingers, refusing to coalesce. My magical reserves are spent, he thought, a cold dread creeping into his heart. He was a conduit of raw power, and now, in his greatest moment of need, that power had abandoned him. He had only his eldritch blast cantrip, a mere whisper of his true strength, or the stolen sword in his hand. He chose the latter, a desperate gamble. Otnum stood tall, his shadow dancing against the soot-stained ruins as he walked forward with calculated confidence. He extended his hand, a gesture of martial honor that felt alien yet instinctively right. To the death or first blood? He offered, a last attempt to control the narrative. Honor, Krell spat, the word a gravelly snarl that carried the scent of stale ale and old blood. You think we're playing a game? The warlord lunged, his bloodied sword whistling through the air, completely rejecting the terms. Otnum twisted away at the last moment, the blade cutting nothing but burning air. The clang of steel against stone echoed in the sudden silence of the makeshift arena, where soldiers from both sides watched with bated breath. Emboldened by his defense, Otnum reached for his magic, but the well was dry. His connection to evening glory wavered, flickered, then coalesced. The arcane energy weaved through his fingers like smoke and tore past Krell, leaving Otnum with only his wits and a stolen blade readying his guard. Krell charged, and Otnum sidestepped, leveling his blade. Is that all you've got, mage? Krell taunted, charging again. All talk and no action. Otnum unleashed a desperate eldritch blast. The crackling beam of supernatural energy surged toward Krell, humming with potential, but the warlord's agility was unexpected. The beam went wide, dissipating harmlessly against a charred wall. Krell's harsh laugh rang out as he overcommit to a murderous overhead strike. Otnam sidestepped smoothly, letting Krell's momentum carry him past. As the warlord stumbled among the debris, Otnam closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He whispered a silent prayer to the deathless beauty, seeking divine guidance. The stolen medallion at his side pulsed with an ethereal energy, fighting his prayer, and his eyes snapped open with preternatural focus. In a fluid motion, Otnam struck Krell's sword hand. The weapon clattered to the ground, skittering across the burning cobblestones. Stunned and weaponless, Krell's face transformed into a mask of primal fury. He lunged to grapple Otnam, intending to use his brute strength to reclaim the advantage. "Minor illusion," Otnam whispered. A shimmering, spectral duplicate of himself erupted into existence exactly where he stood. Krell's hands grabbed only empty air as the real Otnam darted into the shadows. While the warlord was disoriented by the magical trickery, he slid between the duplicates and scooped up the fallen sword. The leather grip was warm, the steel heavy and perfectly balanced. "Serve me, Krell?" Otnam's voice cut through the chaos, dripping with dark charisma. "Serve me, and the blade is yours." For a split second, doubt flickered in Krell's eyes, a crack in the rage. But the humiliation was too great. With a roar that shook the very air, Krell charged one last time, a desperate, suicidal lunge. Otnam shifted his stance, his body a moving target. He watched Krell's body language, anticipating the strike. As the warlord closed the distance, his sword sliced into Krell's shoulder, drawing a line of crimson. Krell staggered, but his own blade caught Otnam's side, a sharp, burning reminder of the stakes. Critically wounded, his vision blurring at the edges, Otnam seized the final moment. He waited for Krell's momentum to carry him forward, then twisted low. Krell's sword swung with murderous intent, but Otnam partially deflected it, taking a glancing hit that nearly buckled his knees. With his last ounce of strength, Otnam delivered a devastating strike to Krell's throat. Blood arced through the firelight, painting the cobblestones a deep, dark red. The enemy commander fell, his life draining away in the heart of the city he had sought to destroy. The watching soldiers stood in stunned silence. The blood-tied siege had ended not with the roar of 1,000 men, but with the cunning of a single person who refused to die. Otnam stood over the fallen warlord, the stolen sword heavy in his hand, as the first hints of a new dawn began to break through the smoke. The adrenaline that had fueled Otnam's duel with Warlord Krell ebbed away, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. He stood over the corpse of the man who had nearly ended his new life before it had truly begun. Blood, thick and dark, pooled around Krell's boots, soaking into the thirsty cracks of the cobblestones. Otnam's breath came in ragged, shallow hitches, each one a victory over the darkness threatening to pull him back into the void of his awakening. Otnam reached down, his fingers slick with Krell's lifeblood. With a grunt of pure, agonizing effort, he seized the fallen warlord's hair and, with a jagged edge of a discarded blade, completed the grim work of decapitation. He didn't have the strength for a clean strike, but the brutality of the act served its purpose. He found a broken spear shaft amidst the rubble, impaling the head and hoisting it high. "Behold your master," he roared, holding the spear high aloft for all the enemy to see. The blood-tied soldiers were sent into a panicked retreat. The effort was his undoing. His vision blurred into a kaleidoscope of red and gray. His legs, which had held through the duel, finally buckled. The dramatic display ended not with a roar, but with a collapse. Otnam hit the ground next to the commander's corpse, the spear clattering away.